Which stint was your most interesting one?
Actually, let me tell you, I have had, I would say Hindustan Lever was a learning ground between 1988 and 1995. I learned the size of the country, the diversity, the languages spoken, because levers was everywhere. We had 31 factories. And you had to communicate to almost every stakeholder, each language, different languages, different cultures, different newspapers. So I think the grooming of a good communication manager was done in HUL because one, it taught you how to be having your head on your shoulders and react to issues which were local but needed a response which was necessary. And if you do not give it, they will say the company didn't want to speak. Now, when the company didn't want to speak, it could be interpreted anyway. So that was the first part where we were having diversity of plants. Then came the second phase in levers, which was from 92, which was liberalization, where in the liberalization period, we started acquiring companies. We acquired Tomco, we acquired Quality Walls, we acquired Dollop Ice Cream, we acquired Kisan. Now, if you are acquiring a company, it doesn't mean that the acquiring company should be seen as somebody who is there to gobble up everything. So the commentary had to be made sure that if it's a joint venture, then it should be a joint venture. If employees will be safe in the new venture, how will we commit that? And keeping the nuances in India, the narrative had to be changed. But it was fun because the journalists were bright, the people were, wanting to build the careers in PR. I was one of the very few, no PR agency, probably maybe 2 or 3 PR agencies had come up over there. I think it was a Roger Pereira or someone, 1 or 2 iPad at that time. In 95, when I joined Pepsi, I think that was something, a very empowered role because Pepsi was going through lots and lots of crises. And we had seen the kind of questions being asked, the kind of competition we had, the kind of export obligations we had, the kind of the entry barriers which were placed in front of us. And then we had a set of bottlers who were the faces of, we had lots of sponsorship. So there was a brand responsibility because you almost started endorsing and a lot of cricket as well as movies you came to connect with because that was the brand where recognition would be absolutely right on top. So how should that brand communication happen at that time? There were a lot of crises. So we developed how should the crisis communication be developed. So for me, the 7 years reporting to the CEO of the company at a very young age, being a part of the management committee, having a place on the table. I always tell people, if you don't have a place on the table, believe me, you will only be a courier service. Legal head will write a response, you will give the response, you will hand it over to a newspaper, they will may or may not publish it. But when you write the response and you tell the response, you own it. And that is the time when you are able to influence how passionately you are involved in that brand or in the crisis.
Criticality of the role. I mean, you mentioned that you were reporting to CEO, right, directly. Today, in majority of the companies, what I'm seeing, there is a trend that communications as a department or a set of people are kind of being merged with marketing domain or vertical. This is something very disheartening to see. I mean, the what is that made this change? I couldn't understand. But this is something which kind of disheartening to me personally.
So no, so I think companies being companies, so typically where the brand communication is 85% of the role of the communications, the brand communication becomes the role of the marketing head. So in such companies, I would say it's fine. But typically, companies like Pepsi and Coke, which impacted the culture of this country, you know, these are companies when it came, other companies globally were looking at what would these companies' success metric look like in India, and then they will invest in India. Number two, all the different things which were about marketing, about process, about bottling, about investments, these companies brought in. These companies brought in ethics, responsibility. So it was a different test model when we came in. And then, while these companies own the brand and trademark and PR, the real person in the marketplace was the bottler because he was selling it. So reputation management was in a big way a forte of the Pepsi company. And once you understand that forte, that you have given your trademark, your, the concentrate, which you supply to the bottlers. Third, your reputation management metric and legal. So that is when the role of the concentrate company or the company which represents the global company, it becomes extremely important. And that is how we built PepsiCo in those days. And also, there was a new for the media. It was fun writing about the cola wars. Now, hardly anybody writes because the wars have moved from cola wars to the so-called telecom wars, telecom brand wars, to now it are the startups who are creating the kind of headlines. Nowadays, you don't find the colas in so much in news. You find them in news many times for sugar issue or something which um, is not easily accepted in the society. But the fact is, these companies, they built narrative because at the end, you may want to have a breakfast at a McDonald's, but you can't have it without a juice, which is from Coke. You cannot have it during the day. You will want a Coke because you are thirsty. But you also want to change your mood. So there are so many things which are there, which are so culturally, attached to these brands. And that is why I would say that, reputation management should be kept with the CEO and not with the marketing head. So the forte, because then the marketing manager will have to take the responsibility of many other operations of the bottlers and crisis management of the plants, which he should have a free state. So to my mind, uh, from 95 to 2002, I was reporting to the CEO, and CEO was responsible for when I joined Bharti, I was reporting to Sunil Bharti Mittal. I was a director. So there were 8 directors with him. I was one of them. So the pleasure of doing things in a different way. For instance,
I was coming to this point. Yeah, very interesting. Now, with those many years of experience, what would you say that how is PR industry has changed? If I kind of push you to give us three definitive trends that you must have seen, uh, the transformation, the changes that you've witnessed in recent times, what would it be?
So the transformation is that, first of all, the companies, many companies have gone to the stock exchange. So we have 6,500 companies plus, which are, so the investor relation has become a very critical role in the last 40 years. From say only 1,000 companies, now more than 6,000 more companies are listed, and all the investors want to know what next, what now, what. So while these companies report to SEBI, but the public at large, the analyst at large wants to hear what is the truth and the real story about this company. The second thing which has happened, which was not there earlier, is corporate governance. Because many companies have faltered in the past on corporate governance, so the boards have become much stricter. So once the boards become stricter, then one more thing which has happened is in the corporate governance that the company has to spend 2% on CSR. So why CSR? Because they want the company should be responsible. Third, a woman director on the board has become essential as a part of the listed companies of India. So, all these things, every time I see an ad, Indian companies need 34,000 directors, independent directors, and how you can be groomed into becoming a board director. Because the board director is now not only a director just as a kind of a rubber stamp. No, he can be held responsible for any corporate governance issue which has happened. So, these are the two big changes which have happened in communication. So what happens is you are more responsible to SEBI, you're more responsible to the media, because people want to know what is the truth, why this kind of action has happened. The third change which I have seen happening is earlier the brand communication was very easy. You created an innovation in the brand, and now here it goes. What a great story you tell. But in the last 40 years, the newspapers, the media houses have learned how to monetize the brands. So what happens is that the brand stories will not come so easily unless you have a fantastic wizard of a PR person who can tell that the story can be published in earned media, shared media, other than the paid media. So these are the three stark differences which have come. Does that help?
Interesting, very interesting. I mean, the spectrum you kind of put forward is very, very vast. From what you've mentioned about reputation management, crisis management, do you somehow think that the kind of rules of online management or crisis management has changed? Because in this diverse nature of media landscape, the various channels, we see a different set of challenges. How would you look at it?
Let me be honest about it. I handled the pesticide issue in the cola wars, in the cola times. Believe it or not, what did we do? We invited people who had a difference of opinion to our factories and say, come and examine it. We tried to create a lot of collaborative experience. We also said, even though they wanted some standards which were not doable, we told our global teams, let's try and do it. So, so my role became important because I was not only a kind of a communicator, but a facilitator of a messaging which was not so good for the company to be told to my senior management and respond to the changing needs of the time. So now, for that, I think the communications role has changed from being tactical to being more strategic. So earlier you were told to tell this because your legal head felt so. Now you are telling a wholesome story. And if the journalist is good and trustworthy, then you can say, look, this part of the story is for your explanation, giving a background, but this part of the story is for publishing. Now the problem arises when you are told nothing is off the record. Huh? Now, in people of my type who have been hardened for the last 40 years will not say anything off the record. You can, for example, publish my entire interview because I would have not said anything wrong.
What
So
I
there are
could
very
understand
few
from
people.
this
Yeah,
is,
carry on.
yeah, what I could understand from this is the fundamentals haven't changed. So being true to your ethos, the honesty, the transparency remains the same. That's the standard for crisis management. What would you say? What has changed in today's time? What will help a communication leader to face or I mean resolve a crisis? What would you say?
So let me give you the biggest dichotomy for a company. What is good for your investor may not be good for your consumer. How do you handle that? Supposing you increase the prices for your consumer, is good for your investor, but not good for the consumer. So there are very tricky situations on day to day, which a communicator will have to tell that story. But let me tell you, these are hard times. This is not an easy time. Second, the advent of social media. Earlier, if the story can only be carried by a newspaper or an online journal. Today, any influencer who has a lakh, follower, and if he tells a false story about you, you had it. So I think the challenge has become much more. So first challenge is between the investor and consumer. How do you balance it? Second is, how do you respond very quickly? I'm handling a few companies, and since morning I'm up 6 a.m. in the morning. There may be a trivial issue which will have happened in an X place in an X town that can become by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock as big. So how do you make sure that you have the right narrative? People in the different medium electronic don't go berserk on it, because you need to make sure that the right news is published. Today the biggest issue is getting the TRP with a false narrative, right? And that the biggest challenge for a PR manager. And these AI algorithms will only help when you know the story better than the AI, right?
When we're talking about social media, influencer marketing, the authenticity sometimes is that question. I mean, what strategies can help? What would you advise for younger PR professionals in this?
I would advise the young generation to be totally involved in the brand building process. Be a brand manager and then tell the story. The reason is you will only become a good storyteller when you know what the brand stands for, when you know how the ad was shot, who was the brand ambassador, what are the commonalities of the brand ethos and the brand ambassador. So I feel that today's communicator, if it doesn't take immersive experience, he will not do justice to his job.
So,
He or she.
knowing the core accountability as a brand manager would help of any PR professional. Now, from your lens, from a traditional media landscape, now when we are in the digital first media landscape, the challenges are new, the opportunities are many. Uh, how are you seeing the nature of PR's role evolving? If I kind of push you to suggest or predict some of the trends that we are going to see in future, what would you say?
So the trends, fake news will increase. So how do you ensure that the fake news is clipped in time? Because there is competition, there are people who don't like you, etc., etc. So you have to make sure that how do you counter all these? One. So how do you counter all these? I also feel that the challenges of today's PR people is coming from even a WhatsApp factory. Because you can keep monitor online media, but you can't monitor on WhatsApp. So how do you make sure that these local groups which are there, how do you manage the communication? 5 minutes. So how do you manage the communication? So I would say that one has to be very well networked. For example, I'm not wanting to be, but I'm a part of some 50 WhatsApp groups where different kind of subjects are talked about, movies, music, etc., etc. Many times I catch something for my clients from those WhatsApp groups. And then people come and say thank you.
With this trend, yeah, I'm with you on this. I mean, with this trends for a brand, for a company, even it's a startup, even it's a established company, across the banner, across the sectors, the stakeholders of brand identity is now multiple. I mean, earlier it used to be sometimes media, sometimes investors, sometimes customers, sometimes brands, owners, but now the stakeholders, number of stakeholders has increased immensely. So anybody and everybody can kind of go out and post about the brand. This has posed multiple challenges. You are absolutely correct on that point.
So, as I said, the most important thing for a head of communication is to have a stakeholder mapping and the narrative which is required for each stakeholder. A common statement is important for all the stakeholders. But then each stakeholder needs something, 2, 3 points more. For example, you need to address your investors in case of a crisis. Because if the investors hear from somebody else, you are going to be in a tough position. So you need to, make sure that your communication to all the investors has gone first. Second, it is not easy to send a communication to all the consumers. I mean, one of the companies I was handling a food product, and they were involved in the recall of a product. But there was a feeling: should I tell it to everyone that I have recalled a batch, or will that create a problem for my other batches? So that dilemma always remains. And look, at the end of the day, what I found, companies which stay true to their brand, true to their customers, and very, very open and transparent to the investors are the ones which succeed. communications has to be open, internal and external, open. And one should not be shying away when times are tough. Because let me tell you, with every crisis, you build the brand better. You have learnings. And I feel in today's world, to be transparent, to be having integrity in this very bipolar world is extremely important.
Golden point, yeah, absolutely true. I mean, being true, truthful, and also transparent will also help. Uh, Now, towards my final question, we are seeing a lot of discussions on AI, data analytics coming in. How are you seeing it helping in PR?
So let me tell you, AI will help you, the data will help you. The data will help you so if rather than putting 100 people, if the AI can help in consolidating the data and data crunching, you will reach out to the media or to the stakeholders much better because we'll be informed in a lesser time. That's one. The second one I would say is AI cannot replace a human being for that matter. But people are trying to use it in many places in recorded voices. That so that the voices keep there's an automatic call and they're trying. Who hears that call? I don't. I get.
I mean, we share this common point that I truly believe AI will not replace humans, and particularly when it comes to PR and media, both the relationships is one thing that hasn't changed over the
Absolutely.
years,
Absolutely.
right? Over centuries, over decades, it hasn't changed. So relationships will, I mean, be the same, and it will kind of help business prosper and move forward.
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. So I would say that relationship is something which helps the person to be listened to. Otherwise, if there is no relationship, the person says, "Oh, okay, I heard you, all right, okay, I'm fine." But Resham does listen to me. Thank you for that.